Welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 298, and today's date is February 24th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Russia Warns the US and NATO of War. Because what do we know? Well, over the weekend, we understand that the opposition and the Ukraine government, they signed a deal. And what happened was the opposition went back on the deal, and they started pushing forward. They pushed the government out of the Ukraine. Many of the Ukrainian government officials resigned, and they pretty much stormed the government buildings and took over. They didn't abide by the deal at all. The reason for this is because they understand they need to move in there, elect a new president as quickly as possible, rewrite the Constitution, rewrite laws, create new laws so they can put the entire country on the private Western central bank system, which is the EU, and have Ukraine join NATO. But what's happening right now is that the Ukraine is now split. Yes, the U.S. and the private Western central bankers and the Eurozone have captured the western portion of the Ukraine, but the east and the southern portions of the Ukraine really side with Russia at this time. And we're going to have to see how this plays out, and we will discuss this a lot more during this report. But let's get into the economic collapse news, and we're going to head out to Europe. And again, Europe has this big problems. Again, when the Ukraine was looking at should we join the EU or should we join Russia? Let's take a look. And they looked around and they saw that the EU, those countries, were imploding on themselves. They had double-digit unemployment, 20%, 30%, 40%. The youth unemployment was 40, 50, 60% unemployment. They continually needed bailout after bailout after bailout because they didn't have the revenue to pay for the interest payments or the programs that they established in the Eurozone. And also they looked and they saw Cyprus. Okay, yes, they had bailouts, but they also had bail-ins where they stole the money. They robbed the people of their life savings. They took 47% of their money, and they still can't access their money. So, of course, the Ukraine said, you know what, we're going to go with Russia, and that's when the riots broke out. But if we look in Europe right now, we are seeing many problems because the private Western central bank system is imploding on itself. And it cannot be stopped. And they think they can stop it by going into the Ukraine, putting them on the private Western bank system, going into the Middle East, keeping the dollar propped up there, going into Africa, into Thailand. And they're continually doing this because they are desperate at this time. But Europe right now, there's around 11 million homes across Europe that are completely empty. They're not in use. And, of course, a number that could house all the EU homeless twice over. That's how many homes are vacant at this time. And let's break this down. Which countries have the largest vacancy of homes where no one's living in them whatsoever? The UK has about 700,000 homes. Germany has 1.8 million homes that no one's living in. France has 2.4 million homes that no one is living in. And Spain, the winner, has about 3.4 million homes where there is absolutely no one living in them at this time. So we can see just by looking at this that the Eurozone is not doing well, and this is why the Ukraine said, you know what, I don't think we're going to go with the EU because they have their own problems. Now, if we head back to the United States is not doing any better. The real estate bubble is completely imploding on itself. Retail is imploding on itself. We're seeing manufacturing imploding on itself. They had to manipulate all the numbers. They had to manipulate GDP. They had to manipulate inflation. They had to manipulate unemployment just to make it look like the United States was doing well. And of course, they want all eyes on the stock market. And you see, with all of this bad news and all these bad indicators that we're getting, the stock market is rising to new highs. So you could tell there's something completely wrong here because it makes no sense whatsoever why these companies have been laying off people. They have no profit coming in, but the stock market is going up, up, up. So you can see that it is completely manipulated. And right now the Dallas Fed completely misses. They've missed now, and they're on a they missed expectations by the most in 4 months and slumped to a 9-month low. So we can see things are not going well right there. And again, we have to remember the extension of unemployment benefits has stopped as of December 2013. And it first was reported that 1.3 million people will no longer receive those benefits and they're going to fall off unemployment. Well, as time goes on, there's going to be more and more people because you only get to keep the unemployment for a certain period of time. And now we're seeing more people. It's nearing 2 million people who have completely fallen off unemployment that cannot find work. And right now, of the 4 million U.S. citizens who have been searching for work for more than 26 weeks, more than half are no longer receiving the extended unemployment coverage, and they still don't have work. So they're going to be falling off the BLS statistics, and we're going to see another drop in the unemployment rate, and we're going to see that coming up very soon. We have to remember elections are coming up. They want the economy looking really great. The stock market's being pumped up, and the illusion is continually moving forward. But we have to remember that the powers, the central bankers, are trying to control the situation all across the world, and the empire of the U.S., the soldiers, is being thinned out across the world, and it's getting much harder to maintain the empire at this time and keep this dollar propped up. In Libya, they're already having problems where the rebels, the Al-Qaeda forces, which is just the people who are fighting back and want their country back, and they want the central bankers and the U.S. government out of their country. They've given the government the ultimatum, you know, let you get out of the country here, and we're going to take over. And if they decide to remove the private Western Central Bank and put all the natural resources on any other currency than the U.S. dollar, this is when things are going to go really south. But again, the central bankers are not going to give up. They want a war, and they're pushing and pushing and pushing. They've done this in the Ukraine, and this might go south on them because of what is happening, because the Ukraine right now is kind of splitting into two. But I digress. Let's get back into what I was talking about here. Again, in January of 2014, going into February, we have only seen bad economic news. We've seen retail sales down the tubes. We're seeing massive amount of stores closing, laying off people. Obamacare is not helping. This is why they had to rewrite Obamacare to help out, because these businesses were laying off people, cutting down the amount of hours, and the unemployment was getting worse and worse. Of course, they kept on manipulating the unemployment numbers, so you can't really notice that. But again, President Obama had to stop and say, whoa, 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 you have to prove to the IRS of why you're cutting back hours or laying off people, and you have to prove to the IRS why this is happening, because they realized that Obamacare is a job destroyer, and they realize this now, and this is why Obama came in and wrote that part of the law. But again, we're seeing terrible financial news. All the indicators are not going well, but we see the stock market going up. So we can tell right now that this is completely an illusion, and they're going to hold on to this illusion as long as they possibly can. But one little thing, one little pop of a bubble, one little something that happens across the ocean here could set the whole entire thing off, and they know it. And this is why they're trying to get these wars going, and they're trying to get as many countries as they possibly can on the U.S. dollar. If they can't get them on the U.S. dollar or the EU, then they will push for war as fast as they possibly can. Now, we understand that Obamacare has many, many taxes interwoven into Obamacare, and right now the Obamacare medical device tax has now led to about 33,000 the loss of 33,000 jobs. A new survey says Obamacare's tax on medical device manufacturers forced companies to lay off or avoid hiring 33,000 workers last year. The AdvaMed report said companies cut about 14,000 workers and decided not to hire about 19,000 workers because of the tax. And there are many other taxes inside of Obamacare. And we're going to see this really wreak havoc on the American people, because you have to remember, Obamacare was set up not to give you all health benefits and to see you all healthy. It was there to it was put in place to get as much money as they possibly could out of you, to keep the government running. This is why there's a tax penalty if you don't want to take it. This is why there are other taxes interwoven into Obamacare, and this is why there's penalties for companies if they decide not to do it. Again, this was designed to create revenue for the government, and since this is completely falling apart, they have to look at different revenue schemes, and the other revenue scheme will be the climate change, the climate warming. And they're building this up, as you can tell in the news. They continually talk about it, how there's climate change, we need to do something, because what they're setting everything up for is to impose some type of tax, probably this spring or summer, to raise revenue. Because you have to remember, all these countries that are having problems, what they end up doing is they end up putting more and more taxes on the people to make up the difference to pay for the unsustainable debt. And they can't do it without the revenue. And as more and more people become unemployed, they realize they don't have the revenue, so they have to tax those people who are still working and tax people in many different ways, or look outside of their country for revenue. And this is why the United States has come up with FACTA, and they go across to many other countries, and they look to bring in revenue and have those countries report on those people who are working in other countries but have a U.S. passport, and they report on them, and then the U.S. goes after them to try to get tax money from these people. And we're seeing this more and more. Now, there is a report out there saying that 20 million more people, more Americans, are going to lose their insurance. New cancellation letters as company plans don't comply with Obamacare. The same failed Obamacare promise that plunged the individual health care market into chaos last year is now hitting small group plans and could result in lost coverage for 20 million Americans. So we're seeing this happen once more. Again, the government does not care about your health. If they truly did care, and this was the best thing since sliced bread, you would have seen Obama, the entire government, sit down in front of all the news agencies and have them all sign up to Obamacare, showing the American people as true leaders how great Obamacare is. And guess what you saw? You didn't see that happen. Most of the people kept their own health insurance from the government. President Obama did, but he's letting everyone know how great Obamacare is. If Obamacare is so great, why are the deductibles so high? Why are the prices so much higher? Why is it costing more people? Why is there a penalty if you decide not to choose health care? Because this was all set up to create revenue. They could care less about anybody's health. Now, in my other reports, I talk a lot about the government wanting to disarm the American people. We've seen many mass shootings during the last year, and we're going to see more mass shootings come up. And you'll know when the main one hits, because we have to understand that the gun bill is pending in the Senate and the UN Arms Treaty is pending in the Senate. John Kerry already signed it, but it's not ratified by Congress. So right now, it's just sitting there waiting for a special event. And you'll know when it hits, because the president will be out there telling everyone, we need these laws passed and we need them now. And that's how we'll know that this is the event that they're going to use. It's going to be a horrific event. It's going to be bloody, and they're going to really play it up. But we also understand is that Bloomberg is out there trying to disarm the American people with mayors against guns. We also see a Harvard professor out there saying that we need to change the Constitution. Well, now there is a former Supreme Court justice who says that we really need to change the Second Amendment because it's not reading right, and we need to change it to something completely different. Right now, the Second Amendment says a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And we have to remember, to bear means to carry, arms means weapons, ammunition, military arms. And we have to remember, infringed is you can't limit, not to limit. So that was the original and still standing Second Amendment right now, even though they're changing it in students' textbooks, and this former Supreme Court justice wants to change it. This is what he wants to change it to: a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms when serving in the militia shall not be infringed. So right now he's saying that each person does not need to have a weapon. It's only when you're serving in some type of militia, which is, again, not what our founding fathers said. And the only reason they're trying to do this is because it would make it easier for the government to disarm all the American people. But we have to remember, you just can't go in and change the Second Amendment. The only way an amendment can be changed is with another amendment, and it has to be ratified by the states within the Union. President can't just do it. A Supreme Court justice can't just do it. And this is why our system is set up this way. So you would have to, I think it's 3/4 of the states have to vote to change it. And guess what? It's not going to happen. They're not going to be able to get this, and they understand this, but they're continually putting this out. They're feeding the public propaganda to make you believe that they can change it. And I've seen in the Common Core textbooks that they've completely changed the Second Amendment, where it just says the following, where it says a well-regulated militia to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, and that's all it says. And my children brought that home, and I saw it, and I think I mentioned this in many reports ago. But you can see what they're trying to do. They're trying to bring up the next generation, and they're trying to make people believe that we can change these things just by saying it, and it cannot be done this way. Now, we talk a lot about DHS, we talk about drones, and again, it's not only in the United States. We see over in the UK that they're creating this new drone program called the Watchkeeper drones, and the drone wars. UK understands that the Ministry of Defense will announce on Monday that live training flights of the Watchkeeper drone will begin over Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire. And what they're worried about is that these drones can be used to track people. And most disturbingly, however, local residents may be targeted by the drones during the Watchkeeper test flights. In 2012, it was revealed that drone pilots in the U.S. trained by tracking and trailing vehicles driving along local highways. You know, who knows? People who are living in the U.K. might see these Watchkeeper drones flying above, following you around as they're training exercises, because we have to understand the reason for all these drones and these blimps and the cameras and the tracking is to keep an eye on the public, because this is the biggest threat to the government power. Those people who are in power, who do not want the people to rise up and remove them from power. So what they need to do is they create lists, they keep an eye on you, they create social profiles, they watch wherever you are with facial recognition, with DNA, with checkpoints, with real IDs, and all this information is then compiled and you are tracked from location to location, and this is why all of this is coming about. Okay, now, nations across the world understand that the United States has been spying on them, and what they're doing is they're taking the initiative, saying, you know what, we want a separate internet, we want a separate system. Iran is looking into it right now. The EU is looking into it right now. The Brazilian president pressed ahead on Monday with plans to lay an undersea communication cable directly to Europe to reduce Brazil's reliance on the United States following reports that Washington spied on them. And then went on to say, we are working on financial architecture for a fiber optic link that would be a direct connection between Brazil and Europe. And you can see what is happening. They want nothing to do with the United States. They want a system where they cannot tap into, so they can and control their own system, so to reduce the amount of spying that the United States is doing to all these nations. I mean, Iran is talking about having an internal internet and then have connections from there going outward, which they can monitor and control, so the United States and other nations can just get into their systems. And we can see many other countries are starting to do the same thing now. Now, we understand that the United States and many other nations with the P5+1 deal, that they're trying to get Iran to agree to the terms of the nuclear deal, which is a complete illusion right now. This is never going to work because their real plan is to infiltrate the banks of Iran. The IMF is already looking into their banks. They're already looking to set interest rates in Iran, and eventually what they will like to do is set up a private Western central bank and put their oil reserves on the US dollar and only have their oil sold using the US dollar. But right now Iran is making other deals, and they are Iran's first vice president has underscored the importance of continuing trade ties between Iran and China, inviting Chinese companies to carry out energy projects in Iran. We will not forget countries like China that stood with Iran in difficult days, and we would like China to be one of Iran's main trading partners. We are seeing this happen all over the world, where China is stepping in and helping countries build their infrastructures, helping them using US dollars, because they're trying to China is unloading their US dollars, and they figured, why don't we use our US dollars to build up other countries' infrastructures? And they're making bilateral trade agreements using the yuan. So we can see what is happening right now. And right now Iran has been making a deal with Russia, and they've been making a deal with China. Syria has made a 25-year deal with Russia for them to help with their natural gas and oil and to build their infrastructure. And guess what? The central bankers do not like this. This is not what they want, because they want their oil, their natural resources on the US dollar. And this goes on to say that the expansion of relations with China has always been one of top priorities of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So we can see what is happening right in front of our faces. China has been making deals all across the world. The central bankers, the United States government, has been using war, protests to keep control of the dollar and keep it from imploding. And I believe right now they are really losing the battle. Now, there was a report out there saying that the United States is losing the game to Russia in Ukraine due to its miscalculated attempts at ousting the government in Kiev. An analysis writes in a column about all of this. And the Ukraine government is overthrown, but the eastern and southern parts will rejoin Russia. Because they're more Russian-based than the west of the Ukraine. And the Western banks and corporations will then loot the western part, and Russian missiles will target the NATO bases in Ukraine. So what they're saying is that Russia, if this happens, and the Ukraine splits into two, and the southern and the eastern sections go with Russia, the western part of the Ukraine, the EU, the United States will loot all the natural resources, put that section on, have them join up with NATO. Of course, they will not get access to the Black Sea, and bordering right against Russia, they will point their missiles to fire at the western point of the Ukraine. And this is what this report is saying. Now, we understand that the Ukraine is really pushing forward. They want to get these elections done. They want to get the laws rewritten. They want to get on the EU. And right now they are setting up the election campaign in the Ukraine. Early presidential election will start on Tuesday, which is tomorrow, February 25th, because they are really trying to push this forward. And we all understand that this has nothing, these riots, these protests have nothing to do with democracy. It has nothing to do with anything. It was a coup d'etat, and what they did is they didn't abide by the agreement. They went in because they knew they had to get the country on the EU. They wanted to take control. They wanted the Ukraine to join NATO, and they wanted this to happen very quickly because they realized that we're approaching the end game. And since the takeover in Kiev, Ukraine is currently undergoing a complete government overhaul as the opposition is trying hard to establish its own order. The new Ukraine authorities that assumed power just a few days ago have been trying to rewrite all the laws, put people into power, and have the entire country join up with the EU. Now, as we know, Moscow is blaming the West, and especially the U.S., for instigating the revolt in Ukraine. The U.S., however, has warned Moscow against taking any military action at this time. They want to keep the country. They want to keep it together. This is the EU and the United States. And Susan Rice was out there. She's saying that if Moscow does deploy troops, it will be a grave mistake. If Moscow deployed troops to halt actions by the demonstrators or attempts to place forces in eastern Ukraine, which is pro-Russia, it would be a really big mistake. And what is happening right now, Russia has deployed their troops. They are moving them from the Sochi Games, and they are moving them to Crimea, and they are bringing the troops into this area. And the giant Russian Air Force transports and rapid deployment forces were placed on alert. The Russian Prime Minister, today I see no legitimate Ukrainian partners for dialogue. If people crossing Kiev in black masks carrying rifles are considered a government, it will be difficult for us to work with such a government. And again, these are not people, these are the agent provocateurs who created this entire thing to get the entire country on the EU, and this was their whole purpose, and it's starting to fall apart right now, and it's not going the way they thought it would be going. And a new report prepared by the Ministry of Defense on a telephone conversation held earlier today between General Staff Chief General of the Army and Supreme Allied Commander of Europe of NATO, Allied Commander Operations U.S. Air Force General, states that Russia has informed the Western Alliance of its full intention to protect the Russian citizens of Crimea, even if it means all-out war. More grimly, this report continues that the General Gerasimov was advised by President Putin to contact his NATO counterpart to inform the West of an immediate order given to Black Sea Naval Infantry and Coastal Defense Forces in the Crimea to protect them. Russian troops put onto full war footing to defend Crimea. This report says includes nearly 1,200 soldiers and Marines were called up and are being placed to defend the entire area. So we can see what's happening right now. The Ukraine is being split into two. The U.S. forces, the EU, want the entire Ukraine. They don't want the western side because most of the industry and things are in the east and southern portions of the country. And again, those are more Russian-based, and Russia is now moving troops in to protect this entire area. So we're going to have to see how this plays out. Will this be the spark that lights up world war? At this point, we don't know. I don't think Putin wants to go that route, but we'll have to see what happens. Now, with Syria right now, again, the U.S. government is out there still hemming and hawing and saying, Syria's holding up this chemical disarmament. They have to speed this up. And they want to do something at this point. And right now, Washington is mulling formal action at a March 3rd to 7th OPCW gathering to force the destruction of a dozen Syrian chemical arms structures. He accused Assad's regime of turning down U.S. attempts at compromises over calls to eliminate the 7 fortified hangars and 5 below-ground facilities by March 15th. So they really want this done. And again, we have to remember that the problem is that the rebels are keeping the Syrian forces from moving this stuff around. It is very dangerous. The United States, the Saudis, the central bankers realize this, and this is all propaganda to get the war going in Syria. And we understand this. We understand they need to get the war started any way they can. They need it to spread across the globe. This is their entire purpose, because they understand the collapse is coming. They don't know how much longer they can keep the dollar propped up, and they understand that all of this will be collapsing down, so they need to cover this entire thing up. And this is why we're seeing all of this happen all over the place. The Middle East is in turmoil. Syria is in turmoil. There really is no peace deal in Iran. We have forces in Africa battling the people in Africa who just want their country back. We see Thailand is unstable, and we're seeing this. Japan and China are going back and forth. So we can see what is happening. All of this is starting to fall apart, and we understand that the United States have been pivoting to Asia surrounding China, because they understand that this and Russia are going to be the biggest threat. And this is why they finalized the deal in the Philippines, and we understand that the U.S. is going to rotate troops in the Philippines because they need that base there to move military assets into that section. And we have to understand all of this is taking place for one reason and one reason only, and that is World War III. But before we get there, they need a catalyst. They need another country to do something to get the war started, because the U.S. is not going to start it. They're going to make it look like it came from another country that actually started it. And this is their entire plan. And we're seeing many, many, many different things happen across the spectrum here. We're seeing cyber attacks. We're seeing, Target, Neiman Marcus. They're all being hit all of a sudden with these major cyber attacks. People's information being stolen from Adobe, from the University of Maryland. And of course, we understand that the central bankers and the government, the Obama administration, want certain laws passed. They understand that they have CISPA pending in the Senate right now, and they want that passed. And this is why President Obama came out with the new cyber framework, saying, they voluntary. Right now, the companies it's voluntary where they can share information, but eventually what's going to be is that they're going to be forced to share information with the government. And this is how they incrementally do this. And you'll see that CISPA's in that law says they will share all the information with the government. And again, they don't want any other currencies. They don't like gold and silver, precious metals. They don't want Bitcoin. And all of a sudden, what we have seen is that the virtual currency was hit by a new malware called Pony. Cyber criminals have infected hundreds of thousands of computers with a virus called Pony to steal bitcoins and other digital currencies in the most ambitious cyber attack on virtual money uncovered so far. It is the first time we saw such a widespread presence of this type of malware. It was on hundreds of thousands of machines. So you can see what is happening. They are removing all the obstacles right now. They are building up cyber attacks. And of course, Eric Holder, the Attorney General, is out there saying we need to do something. Attorney General Eric Holder called on Congress to create a strong national standard for quickly alerting consumers whose information be compromised by cyber attacks. This legislation would strengthen the Justice Department's ability to combat crime, ensure individual privacy, and prevent identity theft, while also helping to bring cyber criminals to justice. And of course, this is the play in getting CISPA passed or any other law, because, again, President Obama already has the executive orders that support CISPA. He's been creating the framework, and you can see where all this is leading. And of course, he went on to say, of course, with all the cyber attacks that we had last year on Target, Neiman Marcus, on Adobe, we can see this is really getting out of hand, and we need to have some type of law where we can share all this information, and the government can get all this information on everyone and control the internet. This is what they're really trying to do. And we can see it's all all the pieces are starting to fit together now, and we can see what they're actually trying to do. Now, the FBI arrested a Georgia militia trying to pipe bomb to because they wanted to take down the power grid. The FBI arrested Georgia militiamen attempting to buy pipe bombs and thermite. The federal agent stated during a court hearing on Friday that the men had a sophisticated terror plot aimed at taking down the power grid and water treatment plants. The FBI representative stated that if the northern Georgia militia members had not been caught trying to buy the pipe bombs and thermite from an undercover agent, they would have likely have successfully attacked the power grid and water plants and would have brought them down. So you can see they are building up this propaganda. Of course, the FBI was there just in time that they were selling them the pipe bombs, because this was a complete setup. They're building up the propaganda to get everyone used to that the power grid will be going down. This is why in California you saw the power grid. It was done by professionals. They've been training. They've been trying to figure out how to do this, and they've been working on it. This was a dry run, and we're seeing this happen. This is why they had the Grid X2 during the fall of 2013. It was a training exercise, because when the real cyber attack hits, they know exactly where all this should go. This is why the NASDAQ, the stock exchange, BATS, all have a kill switch in place to stop the trade from the markets from going too far down. Because eventually what they're going to do is they're going to use this false flag event to show why the economy is not recovering. Because again, their whole propaganda, they are telling us that the economy is recovering. Just look at the stock market. It's going up. We are recovering. Things are looking great. Unemployment's coming down. So they're going to need something, and they're going to have to show everyone that another country caused this to happen here in the United States and across the Eurozone, in Australia, in Canada, and it's all because of this other country who is backed by China, who is backed by Russia, or it was Russia or China that caused this. And this is why all of this is all coming together now. And we can see that they are trying to build this propaganda up. They're trying to make it look like that it's people within the United States that are trying to bring down the power grid, because what they went on to say that the federal indictment also stated that the Georgia militia members allegedly wanted to garner the pipe bombs and thermite as part of an expansive militia operation against multiple federal agencies, the power grid, water treatment plants, and other pieces of vital infrastructure. What they were saying during this time, they were saying that they wanted mega chaos, which would prompt President Obama and the federal government to declare martial law, which would push other militia groups to join in the fight. You see how the FBI, the government, is playing this up? They are playing this up on purpose, because they want everyone to understand that it will be an inside job. It will be radicalized people, constitutionalists. It will be hit from another country. This entire system will come crumbling down because of what's happening, and they will have to declare martial law. And you can see how they are completely preparing for all this. They are making sure that everyone understands what is going to happen. And this is why they continually come out with all of this. This is why they're saying that Syria has biological and chemical weapons hidden in the Alawite section of Syria. This is why they're saying that there are Americans inside Syria being radicalized, and they're being sent back to the United States who are bomb makers and who could, who can handle all of this and go forward with attacking the U.S. This is why they're saying they're in lone wolf packs, and they're very difficult to track, and they could they could be in any part of the country at once, and we can see something happen in New York or Chicago or L.A. all at the same time. This is why we're seeing the cyber attacks from the Syrian Electronic Army hitting Microsoft, hitting government websites, hitting CNN, and of course this is really not the Syrian Electronic Army, but it is the propaganda that they're trying to spread and to let everyone know that this is coming. This is why you're seeing the dry run on the power grid. This is why Janet Napolitano has told us not if but when the power grid has goes down, when the financial institutions go down. This is why there is a kill switch. This is why DHS has been buying millions of rounds of ammo. This is why DHS has been going to the local police departments and local law enforcement, giving them tanks, giving them assault rifles, giving them uniforms, having them in compliance with DHS, following their orders. This is why you've seen the dry runs in Texas and Miami, in LA, with using live fire rounds inside the cities without the local law enforcement really understanding what is going on. This is why you see a fake town being created. This is why you see the Ohio National Guard out there practicing on those who are constitutionalists, who are patriots. This is all in preparation for what is coming. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.